All right, welcome everybody to the Building for Digital Equity, Demystifying Broadband Policy and Funding event. This event is hosted by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, ILSR, and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, NDIA. My name is Pamela Rosales, pronouns she, hers, and I am the Training and Community Engagement Manager at NDIA. NDIA advances digital equity by supporting community programs and equipping policymakers to act. We advocate for broadband access, tech devices, digital skills training, and tech support by working collaboratively with more than 650 digital inclusion practitioners. I will be your MC for today alongside Chris Mitchell. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks. When I agreed to do this, I talked with my agent and they said that Ryan Reynolds would be dressed as Deadpool and he would introduce me. Is he running late? I don't see him around anywhere. I guess I will introduce myself then. Just very unprofessional. I'm very disappointed. I'm Christopher Mitchell at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I run the Community Broadband Networks program, and we have been working on broadband policy for almost 20 years. And the Institute for Local Self-Reliance is nearly 50 years old. It focuses on issues to try to promote strong local economies. And we strongly want to see a high quality internet access that everyone can use and everyone's able to take advantage of. I use he, him pronouns. And we are going to be asking you for feedback at the end of the show. We'll have a link then for people to share what they think worked really well, things that we can improve upon. But I'm very excited to have everyone coming out. And we're also going to have some trivia questions. So when we go into the trivia rounds, we will have a link up on the screen. You can actually get ready if you'd like to open a browser window and go there. There is a slight lag between when we sort of trigger the question and when you will hear it on the stream. And so we're going to try to time that. We're going to try and be very professional about this. And so it will show up around the time I start talking about the question or Pamela starts talking about the question. And what you should do though is that when you see the trivia question on that screen pop up, you should answer it as quick as possible. The fastest people to get the right answers get the most points, and then a couple of those people are going to get a cool prize from NDIA. So I think that's where I stop.
Awesome. All right. So we are so excited to have you all here. The next 2 hours will be a mixture of short presentations and panel discussions from broadband experts, including local activists, policy advocates, and funding specialists who will offer practical insights on how communities can seize this unprecedented level of broadband infrastructure funding to pursue community-driven solutions. Most importantly, this event will be fun and interactive, and the best way to participate is through YouTube. So you can submit your questions and chat with other participants on YouTube. However, if you're not on YouTube, you can still submit questions through Twitter by using the hashtag #BuildDigitalEquity. And you can also email your questions to Deanne, DEANNE, @ilsr.org. Also, to break the ice for the newbies out there that are completely new to digital inclusion and digital equity work, guess what? I am new as well, and you are at the perfect place to ask the questions that you need, because trust me, I guarantee you another person is thinking of the exact same question. So don't be shy and ask away.
Absolutely. This is a great opportunity for people that know a lot to learn some things they weren't aware of, and people who aren't as familiar to learn a lot. I think we're going to have something for everyone here. We're going to start going back a little bit in history, because I just thought it was really important to note that the country has spent decades funding infrastructure. There's been a real bias to funding networks. Even before broadband, there was a lot of money for telecommunications systems. And when we got this year, or last year technically, I think, the Digital Equity Act, it was a major accomplishment. Congress has a bias toward rural states. Not always clear in the results that that's the case, but it was not a foregone conclusion that we would have significant funding for digital inclusion, and we did get it. It's going to benefit everyone: urban, suburban, people in rural areas. It's a wonderful accomplishment. We wanted to kick it off by having Angela Seifer, the executive director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, as well as David Keys, who's the digital equity program manager at the city of Seattle, to talk a little bit about how we got it. So thank you so much for kicking us off.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Angela. Hi, Chris and Pamela. Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you here. So what we've all been celebrating, well, those of us in the digital equity field have been celebrating this $2.75 billion for the Digital Equity Act. And from my point, when NDIA started engaging in the Digital Equity Act, the language, it was already in draft form. So I thought it might be interesting to walk backwards with you. So the point of time that NDIA was asked, hey, what do you think about this? We're like, hey, that's a great idea. And we gave a little bit of feedback on it. But other folks, maybe somebody named Dave Keys, would have been involved a little bit before that. So can you tell us how that came to be?
Yeah, and it is interesting to, I think, also to both look back and say, how do we sort of build on the models and things that were developed before? I was thinking as Chris was talking, over the years, there have been bits of programs. So actually, many years ago, that a U.S. Department of Education had a digital inclusion grant for community technology centers, and then there was in the broadband, or in the economic recovery under Obama, there was the broadband technology opportunity program. So in a way, we're also sort of building on those models and elements. And so what happened with the Digital Equity Act, it's sort of nurturing, was that I was approached by Ben Merkel from Senator Patty Murray's office in the summer, going back the summer of 2018. And we had some contact with Senator Murray's office before that, which is, I think we can come back to, is kind of an important thing about that relationship building. But in short, we had just exploratory conversations over coffee about, so Senator Murray's interested in something to support digital equity. What would that look like? And starting to frame that out, being able to share a little bit of our experience out in Seattle and Washington State and nationally. So we just started framing that out in kind of the summer of 2018. Staff did some work, introduced Senator Murray's staff to Angela. I think the fall of 2018 started doing kind of more detailed development on the bill, which included, kind of passing it around as well as talking about different stakeholder groups. And then the actual first Digital Equity Act was introduced in April of 2019. And so that was introduced by Senator Murray, and then later as well, or just soon after that, kind of at the same, as that was getting introduced, then NDIA and others started ramping up the sort of public education about that, which we can talk more about, but with the creating this Digital Equity Act website and so on. So that germination of the bill was really that kind of summer into fall 2018 into the beginning of 2019 when it got introduced in the spring. And then just for reference, it got, yeah, go ahead.
Let me back you up just a little bit into why is Senator Murray even thinking about digital inclusion? Right? Like, how did that get into her head that this is something that was important? Because I think that's often a piece of the story, of any story, of how things came to be that gets left out. But it's really important to how we all think about our advocacy efforts now. Because sometimes advocacy doesn't start out as advocacy, it just starts out as education.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. I think there was a combination of it kind of came up and sort of tuning in, Senator Murray tuning in initially around education, and what's happening with kids in education. And, one thing that I think an important part is, for legislators, how do we help create opportunities for them to have contact with the community, to be in the conversation? And so I think for Senator Murray, that's happened through a combination of some of like tours that she did, these sort of, visiting back in her district, tours, conversations with educators, a couple of the universities that were also, Washington State University was also supporting some work on digital equity. And then also we worked with their office earlier on, the FCC had been doing some regional tours around broadband. And so we joined in some of the planning for hosting those regional meetings. So that's kind of this other opportunity, sort of regional meetings with agencies that the senators and congressmen are often involved in. And
so is it accurate to say, Dave, that the kinds of events where we're like, there's a policymaker that's going to tell us what they think again, like that can be really exhausting and feel really stupid. But what's actually happening is that they are understanding more about what's occurring on the ground, because they're not just speaking, they're also hearing what's happening at that event. And of course, we would never think that about Senator Murray. But in general, those types of things, do you feel like those types of events where Senator Murray was there or her staff was there, they began to absorb it like here, and then it became a thing for her?
Yeah, I think that's a good representation. So it was kind of that growth of connecting the dots, and having folks in the community to help connect the dots. And in a sense, it's like the dots from two pathways. So one is like this, there's this technology and broadband thing. So what's needed in that? Who's involved in that? And it's the tech industry and so on. And then the other thing is from the other content thing. I care about education in my community, or I care about workforce development. So it's also having folks primed to, and sharing, well, in order to do workforce development, we need internet to do that. And we need skills.
Right. So I thank you, Dave, for joining us for this brief history of the Digital Equity Act. And the lesson we'd like to impart is talk to policymakers, because you don't know what piece of it they're going to catch on to, and they'll end up an amazing champion. We couldn't have a more amazing champion than Senator Maine. Back to you, Pamela and Chris.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Dave. We're looking forward to having both of them back on later on in the show. But I really want to emphasize that, like, the meetings that we do, the conversations we have, they make a difference. It's not always clear in the moment, and some of the ones we are the most excited about may not yield as much progress as one that we did not expect to. We're going to roll into what we're calling our coalition segment, which is so important because the work that we need to do does not involve a brilliant individual solving problems. It really is groups of people, groups of networks working together, because we have a lot of different problems to solve. And I wanted to note something that we're not talking about today, but we may come back to in a future event, which is a wonderful way to build coalitions out of North Carolina. It's called Band NC, Building a New Digital Economy. They develop small grants. I mean, we're not talking about millions of dollars here. They develop small grants to help communities get together, have some meetings, and develop a digital inclusion plan. That moved the needle, $5,000 per county. It's a wonderful plan. Highly recommend looking it up. The way that they really made a difference there. And the other thing that I wanted to note as we start talking about coalitions with 4 different presentations is that some coalitions invite ISPs to be a part of them. Some do not. And some invite ISPs to play a partial role. And so this is something to keep an eye on, because how you relate to ISPs is very important through this, but there's not one path. So with that, let me turn it over to Pamela.
Yes. So next we have Munire Santiago Juster, the programs manager at NDIA, who will share more information about the new Digital Inclusion Coalition Guidebook, why coalitions are needed, the importance of champions, and coalition survey.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Chris. Hi, everybody. My name is Munira Jester, and I'm with NDIA. So I'm here just to share a little bit about some of our learnings from coalitions throughout the country. So one of the things we've done in NDIA, we can go next image, is that coalitions are increasingly becoming essential structure supporting local digital inclusion ecosystems. So when you see here, it's like we have learned talking to coalitions, and especially for the coalition guidebook that we just recently published, is that coalitions are almost, those little children that are holding the parachute. There are people that really work to support and empower the ecosystem. And in the digital inclusion ecosystem, and NDIA have a definition of what that is, but essentially is the combination of program and policies working together to address the unique needs of a community for digital inclusion. So convening and coming together is the first step of building coalition, and coalitions and communities that do try to build a coalition tend to do better into their efforts for digital inclusion. So the next image, I want to just share a little bit more about our new coalition guidebook. So for 6 months, we at NDIA convened coalitions throughout the country to learn more about their efforts and how they come together, how they're structured, and what are some of the models that we could learn from and share with you guys. So I highly encourage you guys to go to our website and download the PDF of our coalition guidebook, and you can do that on our website. And we're not going to share a link here, but you can find it on our website. And one of the several takeaways that stuck with me on this process, one is really learning about the coalition structure. If you go to next image, its structure and function. It's like understanding that coalitions are organic organizations that come together, as an organization of organizations. So it's a collective of people coming together that try to collaborate and build momentum in their digital inclusion movement locally. So we learned that there's essentially 5 layers for coalition structure. New thing was really understanding backbone organizations and how they support coalitions throughout the country. And also, like how Chris mentioned, like knowing that coalitions have different groups and different spaces that for community to engage in a more deeper level or in a more collaborative resource sharing level. And ISPs are always one of those internet service providers, one of those members that coalition really go back and forth, and every coalition has a different take on that. So you see there that the function of the coalition is very much an organic ecosystem in the community, and each community is different, each coalition is different. And lastly, the thing that I want to remember from this is that coalition, definition of coalition, it's not, you don't come a point that's like, oh, now you're a coalition, now you're not a coalition. But understand that the first step for you creating a coalition is really partnership. It's building community and convening people into this space. And by doing that, it's really you assessing your digital inclusion ecosystem. Who is providing digital inclusion service? What are some of the policies that we do have locally in state or nationally? How can we affect change and better educate and advocate for our local digital inclusion ecosystem? So creating the partnership, creating that space is usually the first step of creating a coalition. But then we learned that coalitions have goes to several stages, and we're able to identify right now 4 main stages, and goes all the way to stage 4 right now is refinement. So coalitions, especially older coalitions, are reassessing their goals and realizing that the community has grown and the awareness on the digital inclusion needs are great, and there's funding coming through. So how coalitions are adjusting to that, that's becoming critical process of coalition development. And lastly, I want to make sure that you guys know that NDIA just put out an intake form, a survey out to hear from you. We want to better connect with you and your coalition. So if you do have a coalition that's just starting or it's been in functioning for a while, I encourage you to go to our website, register your coalition so we can better engage with you and better connect you with resources. And we're really looking to provide a more robust infrastructure to support you in your efforts.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Moniree.
Thank you for having me.
As we were going through that, I felt like, I don't know, my hair was blowing back. I feel like we might be going a little bit fast in terms of covering different materials quickly. We're going to show a video here in a second. I'll explain that, but we are going to do our trivia break right afterward. And so I do want to let people know that we're not going to keep rushing through things. We have some little bit of breaks to let you catch your breath. And if you are watching this someplace other than YouTube on the NDIA's channel, you may want to check it out. You want to make sure you're live to participate in the trivia. Otherwise, other people are going to have an advantage. Now, we're going to introduce the broadband action teams in Washington State, which is one of the ways in which we are seeing a state deal with these challenges of building coalitions. We have a wonderful video prepared for us by Dustin Loop, who is the program manager at the National Broadband Mapping Coalition. And after that video, we are going to roll into trivia. So enjoy the video, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Dustin Loop, Program Manager for the National Broadband.
Hey, Dustin, where'd you go? Hiccup. We'll be right back with Dustin. Or this is a chance for me to riff, I suppose.
What a quick video.
Yeah, no, I thought it was longer.
Hi,
I remember
I'm
it being
Dustin Loop,
longer.
Program
There we
Manager
go.
for the National Broadband Mapping Coalition, which you'll hear a little bit about later. But this session is going to focus on what we in Washington call broadband action teams, or BATs, which are community-based coalitions that work together to address broadband and digital equity needs in their communities. These BATs, which has popped up all over the state, are primarily organized at the county level, although not exclusively, and each has a unique set of priorities, challenges, and resources that demonstrate why it is so essential for digital equity work to happen at the local level. I had the pleasure to hear from two BATs, one from Stevens County and the Spokane Tribe, and another from Lewis County. The Stevens County Spokane Tribe team was the first to form in the state. So we're going to kick off with the old BAT, and I'll hand it over to Deborah Hanson, WSU Extension County Director in Stevens County.
Thank you very much, Justin. And I gave him approval to call me the old bat because it's a kind of an inside joke with us. My name's Deborah Hanson, and I work for Washington State University Extension. And I'm very happy and proud to be the leader and facilitator for our local Stevens County and Spokane Tribe Broadband Action Team. It is a grassroots group of people, and we're not a formal organization, and we all are involved in it because we care about broadband and we want to help fix it. Access, adoption, affordability, all of those issues are things that we work on. We have been a local team that's been working on broadband for many years. I've been involved in it at some level for 20. But in 2016, we had a massive forest fire, and the fire camp that was trying to put it out did not have access to the internet. And there's great stories about what they had to do and hoops they had to jump through to get the maps to their fires. But we decided to start a broadband action team, and our commissioner McCart was the one who said, we need action. No more planning. We need to solve it. So our broadband action team was born in 2016, and it has spread throughout the state of Washington, mostly because I'm part of Extension. And we have extension offices and connections with people all across the state. And we partnered with our Washington State Broadband Office. So our best practices and our challenges and our wins have all been shared with people throughout the state to try to figure out how to fix this problem. But one of our main tenets is broadband is local. My broadband problems in Stevens County that we try to solve are different than even our next door counties and our different tribes that are across the state. So your team is going to look different than ours, act different than ours, and have to solve different problems than ours. And more importantly, have different resources than ours. We do not have a port or a public utility district in our county. So we have to think of other ways to solve our problems, our broadband problems in Stevens County. One of the things that we care about in our committee or our group is that we are technology neutral, boundary neutral, politically neutral, internet service provider neutral. We're trying to solve the problem for the people in our county. And it's going to look different for us because we have a lot of mountains, rocks, rivers, and trees. We are sparsely populated, and the solutions are going to look different for us than they would in an urban center or in a different county. One of the challenges that we identified very early on in our broadband action team was that the FCC maps did not correctly portray what our broadband access was. So early on, we got involved in mapping. And one of the things that has been really powerful for us is to create these information sheets that are very specific to our county. It talks about the issues in a global scale, like mapping or how libraries or fire districts are affected, but it's very specific to our county. How does it affect us? They're one-page forms that we can hand out to our elected officials or at every level so that they can know what our specific issues are. So I encourage you to create resources that you can use to tell your story, and use people in your community from all different walks of life and different organizations, because it's telehealth, it's workforce, it's economic development, it's public safety, it's education, and many more. Anybody that's involved in those kinds of issues can come to the table and help you either with building the broadband or delivering the broadband or helping people understand the broadband. So the reason I like doing these kinds of webinars is now I have discovered ILSR, and I've known about NDIA, but I want to help them tell the story of their resources. I want to tap into their resource for bringing it back to my community. I encourage you to work with anybody that cares about broadband. One of the things that is beneficial for us is our attitude of no guilt for our meetings. We have 46 people on our broadband action team, and that doesn't even include our 16 plus internet service providers that pay attention. But they don't all come to every meeting because we need them to do their job. So periodically they come when they can. And then the understanding is if I need them for something like a letter of support or something else, then I call them. Because we have this relationship that we're all trying to figure it out, it's been very fluid and actually quite fun because we all know we're trying to solve the problem. I think they're going to put our website up, which many of these resources are linked to, and you can check out the things that we've done. Our general form that I showed, that does show kind of a snapshot of what we've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years. I wish you luck. It's hard work. Stay at it. Don't give up, and enjoy the process and find new partners at the table. Thanks for inviting me, Dustin. I really appreciate being able to talk about our story.
Thanks, Deborah. Now we're going to turn to Lewis County, and we'll hear from Jeff Bain from the Lewis County Public Utility District and Frank Corbin, the recently elected chair of the Broadband Action Team, to tell us about their unique story and approach to the local Broadband Action Team.
Thanks, Dustin. So taking us back a few years, the district began fielding questions about getting broadband out to our communities that really don't have it. You know, we heard many stories, and one that I really remember as of a college student that had to travel 30 minutes to a local library just to get internet access to complete an online assignment. And another one where an emergency first responder, they couldn't have access to the information that they really needed. So after looking internally, the district really determined that there wasn't a concrete plan at the district or even locally for bringing broadband access to our communities. The district then went out and pursued a grant to undertake a broadband study and really take a look at what that was for Lewis County. It was a very successful effort, in my opinion, with over a 10% participation rate. You know, statistics showed that 77.2% of the survey participants had internet speeds which don't even meet the definition of broadband. And the majority of the participants also believe that internet is really an essential utility, like water or electricity. Part of that process was the formation of the Broadband Action Team. You know, community members jumped at that opportunity to get involved with the group and really wanting to help. You know, after forming, the team had to assess, you know, really what was our goal. It was determined that the primary objective is to figure out how to get that high quality, affordable internet to all of Lewis County. and to take an active role in figuring out how broadband would get to these areas. Rallying around that goal has spurred conversations and engagement with other community leaders. You know, it's really just not about who does it, but it's really standing up and being part of the solution and making sure that that solution gets done. During COVID, the group coordinated with school officials to figure out how to address the digital equity issue and ensure that all students had access to broadband. That really showed us that we have a lot of work to do. You know, I think it's important to note that the PUD started that broadband action team, but took a step back and decided that it was something that the community should really take charge of. You know, we reached out and brought on more community members onto that team and really began to scale the PUD involvement back. As the community became more engaged, the group became more official and brought more projects to the table. During this process, we were able to bring people like Frank on board and take the team to that next level. Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Bain. Really appreciate that. Yes, I was initially part of the Broadband Champions group that was established by the PUD in an informal fashion. And after the study was in fact finished, it became very obvious to all of us in the community that something significant needed to be done regarding broadband. The leadership of the PUD was critical in getting the broadband action team to the point that it was determined that there was actually a need to formalize. Where I came into the picture was leading the efforts to adopt bylaws, establish membership, and vote on leadership. The group was intended to provide endorsements from a community group of project proposals seeking grant funding as a way to boost their applications and bring much needed funding to Lewis County broadband efforts. As the group's work carried on, the scope of the work expanded to support the community in other ways. For example, the team established a legislative committee to track and keep the group informed on state legislative developments and to provide a mechanism where we might offer testimony in support of legislation. There's a broad representation from throughout the county, and the group has been successful in ensuring that digital equity is a primary priority. The goal is to ensure that Lewis County is on par with Seattle or any other major metropolitan area in its broadband ecosystem.
Thank you. The broadband action teams in Washington state I find very exciting, and I'm hoping we see other states working as hard to push this organizing and decision-making down to the local level. We're going to do a trivia break in a second. I just wanted to let people know we should be going to telecomtrivia.link right now. We do have coming up soon a discussion about funding in which we try to focus on the things you really need to know. We're going to talk a little bit about telehealth. We are going to touch on digital navigators, and we're going to come very soon to lessons from great work that's been done in Maine. So let's kick off the trivia. The first question I'm going to be reading, but again, try to answer it as soon as you can. The author and outspoken advocate for better internet access wrote Captured Audience and Fiber, The Coming Tech Revolution and Why America Might Miss It. So you're trying to pick the author out of these people. And I'm gonna give a little hints here. Okay, it's not Susan Corbett. She has done great work in trying to make sure everyone benefits from the internet in Maine for a long time. Andrew Bloom wrote the book Tubes, which is a wonderful book to look at how the internet works, kind of how it all comes together and it's all connected. And Nicole Turner-Lee does really good work with Brookings, and she's focused on digital equity for a long time. But our answer is Susan Crawford, who's been a wonderful ally in this work for many years. All right. You want to launch into the next question, Pamela?
Yes. Okay. Me too. I'm nervous. All right. Question number 2. In 2017, we knew about 6 U.S. place-based digital inclusion coalitions. In the past 5 years, by how much has the number increased? All right. And here's a little shameless plug to, again, check out our updated coalition guidebook that we already talked about, and to register with coalitions and DIAs to get better and the resources.
I was hoping it was like 500,000.
Okay, time's up. If you answered 280%, you are correct. Coalition 2017 to 23.
All right. We had a number of people who got that right. We have one more question, and want to make sure that we're all on the same page there. Excellent. Thank you for people who are playing this. I hope everyone's getting something out of it. What singer-songwriter launched his own high-speed internet service provider? And internet should be capitalized. I'm gonna be really upset with someone here. You can choose between Richard Branson, Jaron Lanier, John Perry Barlow, or David Bowie. People who aren't as familiar, I think of Richard Branson as like a British version of Mark Cuban. He's got the accent and everything, and I think he's mostly known for windsurfing without a shirt on. Jaron Lanier's had some great some books that have been highly recommended about how the internet is changing society and economies. John Perry Barlow also started the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and wrote the Declaration of Independence for Cyberspace. Wonderful. But the answer was David Bowie, which I did not know. I would have gotten that one wrong. Definitely kudos to my team for getting that. And looks like Brandon jumped into the lead with that one. Excellent. That was a good one. Definitely confusing. All right. Back to our regularly scheduled content.
All right. For those who lost this one, you have ways to redeem yourself. Don't worry. All right. So I am so excited to have Shannon Millsaps, the Director of Programs, Transportation, and Infrastructure at Thrive Regional Partnership, to talk about Thrive's successful regional broadband alliance and how to spark connectivity in your community.
Good afternoon, y'all. My name is Shannon Millsaps. I'm the Director of Programs at Thrive Regional Partnership. I want to thank Christopher and Pamela for inviting me to speak for a few minutes with you today. As a quick upfront contract, I'm going to spend a little less than 5 minutes now to talk briefly about Thrive, our regional broadband alliance, and I promise to leave you with 4 questions that you can use to begin sparking connectivity dialogue in and between your communities right now. Thrive Regional Partnership is a nonprofit organization with a mission to inspire responsible growth through conversation, connection, and collaboration in the greater Chattanooga region. Our footprint includes 3 states, 16 counties, 79 municipalities, and 1 million people and growing across Northeast Alabama, Northwest Georgia, and Southeast Tennessee. Our regional approach really reflects the scale of living our lives in the corner of these 3 states. We're anchored by Gig City, but the Thrive region is home to a vibrant circuit of people. Research shows more than 47,000 individuals commute into Hamilton County each day from neighboring counties and states. Our footprint also encompasses unique biodiversity and ecosystems that the region really depends on for community health and a recreation economy. Where many see barriers and boundaries, Thrive sees opportunities. Our regional broadband alliance, born just after the pandemic shut everything down, is a collective impact partnership. Its goal is to narrow the digital divide across our region by equipping communities with accessible and affordable high-speed internet at home, school, and work. The work of the alliance is guided by a principle that connectivity is essential infrastructure, as are digital literacy and equity efforts. This cross-sector, multi-jurisdictional network includes more than 40 public and private stakeholders. These are ISPs, utilities, government leaders, and elected officials, healthcare providers, educators, other private industry stakeholders. And through the alliance, we are able to provide a regional framework for piloting research and attracting funding opportunities, as well as developing new methods that help expand coverage. Okay, I only have a moment left. So let's step through these 4 takeaways, 4 questions you can ask to spark connectivity and begin to build a foundation for alliances across boundaries in your own communities. Number 1, who are the partners in your community that will lead and support this work? Where are the resources? Who would be a good resource? The more diverse, the better. Think public, private, and philanthropic stakeholders. Number 2, where is the need? Yes, federal data counts here, where current internet service is provided, where it's accessible, But think ground level social services, housing authorities, food banks, school systems with free and reduced lunch, 211 information. And number 3, what are the potential hurdles and what's one step you can take to overcome them? These could be legal, like current ISP contracts, physical, like a geographic location, emotional barriers like skepticism and lack of trust, as well as socioeconomic and anything else distinctive to your community. Number 4, how can you effectively communicate this work across your community? Think about and engage with trusted institutions, traditional news outlets like TV and radio, as well as social media. And don't underestimate the power of each community organization's audience. Also, step back and ask yourself, who is missing from this work? And I'll leave you with one final reminder. You cannot force connectivity into your community, but you can build it with your community. Hope you found this helpful. My information is on the screen. You can reach out through thriveregion.org or send me an email directly at smillsaps@thriveregion.org. Thank you for your time today. I look forward to more discussion.
Awesome. Huge shout out to Shannon for sharing all the great things of Thrive's successful regional broadband alliance. We do have a question for her. However, we could always ask her when she ever joins back. But
I think we might have lost Shannon.
Okay.
I'm not seeing her in the backstage. So I think there was perhaps a miscommunication, and we should probably move on. I think that we would love to have Shannon back at a future event where we can actually address some questions with her. So I know that she's traveling, and we just found out that she's having connectivity issues. So thank you, Shannon. Wonderful video. We would love to have you back to make sure that we can grill you live at a future event. Very difficult questions. You can count on it. So I think that brings us to, I was planning on just relaxing while you asked a hard question there. You know where we are?
Yeah. Introducing the panel of Peggy and
Right. Okay. You know, I'm really glad that one of us is paying attention. Thank you, Pamela. Let me bring on two people that I think the highest of. They're doing great work in Maine. Maine has a long, thriving, and very productive coalition. In fact, I would say perhaps multiple ones that work together in different ways that are looking to make sure that everyone has better networks. They have a significant challenge with rural connectivity, as well as the digital equity challenges in areas that already have a good network. So let me start off by introducing Peggy Schaefer, who is the director of the Connect Maine Authority. Welcome, Peggy.
Thanks for having us.
And then we also have Krista Thorpe, who is the Broadband Project Lead and Community Development Officer at the Island Institute, which is an organization just done really wonderful job, I think, projecting more power than people might have expected. So wonderful work there.
Thanks, Chris. Nice to be here.
Great. So you're going to do a presentation, and then we're going to ask you some very difficult questions. See if we can make Peggy sweat.
Not possible.
Not possible.
Sorry, I'm working on this. Maybe we're not going to share.
I know. Oh yeah, there it is.
Okay. So the Broadband Coalition in Maine is made up of a number of different groups. And I think, can you go to the next slide? It would be helpful. So, you know, I think the secret for Maine has really been sort of a shared vision and shared goal. And our goal is that everybody in the state is going to get connected to a high quality, high speed connection that is affordable. The shared vision is that this can really only happen through communities and with community voices. And so we all work really diligently to make sure that the voices of the people who are going to use the broadband are an active and a part of every conversation in broadband in the state. So one of the things that we've been doing very well is we really have looked at how we create diverse partnerships to help this project go forward. And we've looked at, we have a broad base of geographical interest. We have community economic development organizations. We have industry partners. I know Chris talked a little earlier about some coalitions have industry partners and some don't. We have had them from the beginning, and they've been a really valuable part of our group. We also have statewide organizations, and we make sure we include people from healthcare, from industry, from workforce, and from education. Want to go to the next slide? So this is an idea of who is in our coalition. And, we founded ourselves in 2015. Hard to believe, 7 years ago. And we were actually founded by, at the time, the state public advocate, who came forward with a bill to make some changes in the Connect Maine statute, including the importance of adding community planning grants as a way to start inspiring these community conversations. And we started really as a policy focus group. So we brought people into the legislature to testify on bills. And we've been pretty successful at that, right? So we created the ability for towns to create broadband utility districts. We have increased the PUC, is very complicated, the PUC's ability to work on pole attachment. We have gotten actually a project where the municipalities can get attached to the poles without make ready, which is a significant savings to a municipal cost for building a network. And one of the major pieces that we have done is pass a bond, which takes 2/3 of the legislature to vote for, to actually fund broadband. So we've done a lot of stuff. We started with a mailing list of about 2,000. We now have a mailing list of over 3,000. And one of the things that I think is true about our coalition is that we never sit still. We are constantly learning and constantly changing. And so in the past several years, we have began to put in more and more support systems to help these community broadband teams move forward. We host a crowdsourced speed testing site. The coalition led the bond campaign for the 2020 bond, which we got about 76% of the vote when it went out to the public. We have an ongoing policy committee that meets weekly during legislative session. The Allen Institute hosts a weekly Let's Talk Broadband. We still have monthly news updates. We have hosted 2 broadband boot camps, which are these are community intensive groups that meet on a monthly or monthly basis in specific parts of the state to help those broadband communities get up and running. We now hosting a new piece called the Community of Practice, which Krista will start to talk about in just a minute. And we've also started a program called Community Boosters. I think the most important thing that we try to do is I got this idea from Jeff Searle, actually. He used to run the North Carolina program, which is we do a lot of R&D, which is rip off and duplicate. And that's really the secret to the success of a coalition, is to constantly change and constantly listen to what you're doing and evolve as you go on with the same focus of the same goal and the same mission. You want to go to the next slide? Great. Krista, you want to talk about community practice?
Sure. Yeah, I'm glad that Shannon went right before us, because I think a couple of those questions that she put out that communities should be asking when they're going on broadband relate directly to the community of practice, and why it was identified as just a key way to actually increase the momentum and speed projects in Maine toward funding, when we all looked around and saw that suddenly maybe the floodgates were going to open and we were getting this funding, but we needed to know that on the ground there were strong public-private partnerships and projects ready to actually start building infrastructure. So the community of practice is a group of people with shared goals. We call them the practitioners, but they're people who have jobs at the local economic development corporation in their county. It might be a planning commission, someone who holds a job where they were tasked with helping the communities in their region plan for broadband. A lot of the members of these 12 practitioners are the same people who were sitting at the table with us in 2018 at the Maine Broadband Coalition Broadband Summit, just sitting around and saying, how did you do it? What grants did you get? How did you work with this particular ISP? And just asking each other questions, figuring out, we might be 200 miles separated, our geographies, but maybe we have the same incumbent provider. How did you work with that provider? So constantly, during those summits, we saw this really valuable information being shared. But then we'd leave the summit, we'd all go back into our jobs and feel slightly overwhelmed with the amount of information out there and the lack of capacity in here in our jobs to actually be fully supporting communities. So the concept behind bringing together a community of practice was monthly, these 12 practitioners get together and work towards certain goals around infrastructure funding, digital equity. And as part of the program, each of those practitioners who, again, are doing broadband as like one element of their job, sometimes off the side of their desk, now each will also receive $4,000 they can give to somebody who's in their community who's helping with broadband as a stipend to move things along faster, help with grant writing. It's part of the Maine Broadband Coalition's regional capacity building program. And back to Shannon's phrase she used, trusted institutions. We have this question often in broadband: are the people with the resources to do the work the right people to get those resources to the people who need them most, right? Like, is digital equity going to be lost if you're just funneling resources toward organizations that are kind of already set? And I think that that's where this community of practice is really key. They are the regionally positioned folks who know the local food pantries, know the local programs available for students from needy families. So they're the ones on the ground who maybe are actually the best positioned ones to collaborate with the state on broadband planning. Really excited to share this model. We really just kicked off in December, but again, these people have been at the table for years now, and now we've just formally brought them together. And I think that we're already seeing real impacts from it. So I don't know if you had anything to add there, Peggy.
No, I don't. We have one last little thing here, the next slide, which is sort of the learnings that we've had, which is, more hands make the load lighter. We have constantly grown our coalition. We've worked diligently to attract diverse groups like the Maine Farmland Trust and Family Planning. We want to create a space where we learn from each other and that we can change. And we're always adapting constantly and continually. I mean, I think since I've been in charge of the Connect Maine, every single round we have revamped our broadband community grants to make them a little easier for communities to apply for. Small amounts of money make a significant difference. And don't be afraid to fail, right? Learn and adapt, but don't be afraid to fail. And the process is additive. Flush what doesn't work, keep moving forward. And just remember, everybody is a leader in their own space, right? I think that one of the successes that we have had with the coalition is that we have lots and lots of leaders, but nobody's in charge. And that really has been the cement that's glued us together. So that's our quick learnings.
Awesome. Thank you, Peggy and Krista. I love that everyone are leaders in their own right, but nobody's in charge. I love that. So we do have some awesome questions in the chat that I want to ask. So the first one is, how many Maine Island have fiber to the home networks?
All right, I get it. I should know this right off the top of my head.
Wait,
There are 15 unbridged year-round Maine communities on islands in Maine, and we got Cliff, the Cranberries. Some of them are in develop. So really, just 2 have fully built fiber to the home networks at this time.
Long has it now too.
Oh, right. Long got CCIA. I think CCIA. So 3 of the 15, but Monhegan, there are a handful that have gotten funding.
Yep.
Like you probably know, and are building, lighting up soon.
Cranberry has funding. Cranberry's built. Chebeague is built. No, Chebeague is coming in for funding. Cliff is built. Islesboro's built. Long got built. Monhegan has a grant to build. We've been working on Vinyl Haven for a number of years, and they're still a little recalcitrant. I mean, islands are as independent as everybody else.
Idaho got NTIA.
Yep, Idaho got NTIA funding. Swans is probably coming in this time. So we've been connecting a lot of the unbridged islands, and we're also working on the bridged islands, right? There's a definite difference there, right?
So we're halfway there, fiber to the home. For unbridged, and those tend to be community-owned networks too, which is, in a couple of cases they're not, but so that's just a huge lift for those communities. And then Island Institute works on the coast too. There's really 152 communities that are in the Island Institute coastal and island footprint, and we have an ambitious goal to get them all connected by 2030, and making some progress.
Awesome. You're definitely on the way there. Another question that I have is, what is the biggest obstacle your association encountered? They also wrote legal rights of way, things like that.
I would have to say in Maine, one of the biggest, there's been a couple of big obstacles to broadband. One is we didn't have any money, right? So up until 2020, we had about $1 million a year. And so we were, parsing it out very thinly. And then we got some CARES funding, and then we got the general fund bond issue. And now we have the American Rescue Plan, the Capital Projects Fund, and soon to come. So we have been, I always sort of joke that when you don't have any money, you plan, but the planning has put us in a place that we are ready for the money, right? And so I think that's really, really important, is that, again, our goal is that the consumers, the taxpayers, the people in the community are the ones that should drive these conversations. And because we've been doing that for a long time, and that's been the focus of the coalition, how to build that capacity, we are now ready for those communities to take a lead in this funding. And there's going to be all different styles, right? So some are going to do a broadband utility district, some might do municipally owned, some might make a partnership with an ISP and have the ISP own it. It really depends on the community, but the important piece is the community is the one that has to drive that decision as much as possible. And so our biggest problem in terms of when we actually go to build is pole attachment. It's very complicated, right?
One of the things that has come up in the chat is asking for more detail about the boot camps, and I want to use that as a second to note that you developed independently, I think, but there's something similar from the Blandon Foundation in Minnesota, which has long done great work, particularly Bill Coleman helping them out with a program they called Accelerate, which has also been done in Illinois by Bill Coleman, and talked about it on our Community Broadband Bits podcast, so people could get a sense of how they handle it. But can you tell us a little bit more about how you all handle it?
So the first boot camp was in the western part of the state, and that was a group that had a planning grant called Maine West. And they identified specific communities to be part of the grant. Now, what had to happen was that the community had to agree to start a broadband planning committee, so that they had to agree to have some kind of seeds to start. And then we held, I think it was, I forget, it may have been monthly, it may have been bi-monthly. It was right during the pandemic. So we had all these great plans before the pandemic, right? We were going to bring all these people from Western Maine. We were going to take them out to an island. We were all going to have lobster. We had these really great plans. We ended up doing it all on Zoom. It actually was really great. So I think it was probably 10 sessions. And we brought in people from away to talk to them. We had internet service providers come and talk to them. We had, people who are experienced in community planning come and talk to them. And we talked about mapping. We talked about a whole variety of things. And actually, that's where we got the idea to do the crowdsource mapping from this group, because they were really hung up on who in our area has service and who doesn't. And as much as we could say, that doesn't really matter that much. What you're really trying to do is a plan for your community. It was the thing, right? They kept getting stuck on it. So that's when we decided to bring in crowdsourced speed testing, and we launched it there. And to me, the most important thing about that crowdsourced speed testing was it gave the community something to do, to go talk to each other about broadband. So it enabled those conversations. And that was really, really important. So from that broadband boot camp, we now have a couple groups. One is called the Eastern Slopes, which drives me nuts because they're in the far western part of the state, right? But anyways, it's called the Eastern Slopes. And they're organized around their school district, which is really interesting for us because it's a structure that all those towns are familiar with. And they're looking at doing a municipal broadband utility district. They are also talking with the next group up, which is called Mahoosix, which is in the Bethel area. So it's very mountainous. And they're also talking about doing a broadband utility district. So that's been very successful. We have a new boot camp launched in Washington County, which is actually on the other side of the state. That is on the eastern side of the state. And that's actually just started. And so each session is held on a specific topic, right? So they'll have the providers.
Well, Peggy, I'm sorry.
Talk about mapping. So that's sort of how it begins to work. I don't know if Krista, you want to say anything because you've been working.
Well, I had a specific question. Unless Krista, do you want to talk on the boot camp, or can I ask you
No, thanks for sharing the links. There was a second one on that Sunrise County that's happening now. Anyway, we'll share those out. Yeah.
So I want to make sure we have time to ask you a specific question that I think others have to deal with, which is, I remember when I felt like Island Institute was sort of like just starting in the broadband space and kind of wondering, what are we doing? How are we going to make a difference here? What advice do you have for organizations that are in that same spot right now?
If it were just coming from Island Institute's experience, I'd say you don't have to start with broadband as the topic. Island Institute got into the broadband work through our economic development work. I think that you can come at this from so many different angles. But with economic development, it was that small businesses in remote areas were having hold up on their credit card processing machines, or people were having to drive, 10 miles to a library to upload a picture to their website. And so enough of those stories were related to the benefits of broadband so that it really wasn't a big leap to say, there's this common issue here, and it is broadband. And here's kind of a roadmap that can start you down this planning that will get you over here to the benefits. So that's kind of a key thing, is to just focus on what it makes the people in your community unique, what makes people want to live there. And pretty much everything can be connected back to broadband access.
And we have another group, which is the Northern Forest Center, which is obviously the forest. And they're in it for the exact same reason. They've been working in these communities in economic development, and broadband kept coming up as one of the barriers. And so that's how they began to engage in this conversation.
Well, thank you both. It's wonderful. I think Maine has one of the bigger challenges, and I've always been happy that the leadership that we've seen from Peggy, from you, and your really fun personality, from the Island Institute, the way it's buckled in and really represented those interests. I tell islands all over the country to look at what you're doing at the Island Institute. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to answer any questions. If people want to email us, we're good. Happy to talk.
Totally.
Excellent. I think, Pamela, you're going to run us into the next fun round.
Yes. So after we do this trivia break, we are having the next things are coming up is digital navigators, the funding segment, which I know a lot of people are really interested in, mapping, and then after that, it'll be our other trivia break. So for those who, again, need that redemption from the first trivia, here's your chance.
Excellent. It's going to pop up, and I think you got the first question, right?
Yes. So Comcast they have 9.1 million, 31.7 million, 113.5 million, 325. A lot of numbers. So some fun fact is that Comcast is the most popular cable provider in the United States. Comcast also accounts for over 40% of all broadband internet.
And I think it's odd that it's rounded off perfectly. I mean, what are the odds of that? All right, I'm going to say it's not 9.1 million. Give people a hint. Oh, not a great timed hint.
So the answer is 31.7 million. Okay.
All right, Mike McCarthy vaulted to the top. Now I'm going to be reading this one. And this one is, how much did Congress appropriate for the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund program, which we call CCPF? And the options are 350 million, 900 million, 1 billion, or $10 billion. And Sean's going to be telling you all about this in a segment that's coming up. So if you don't get it right now, that's okay. You're going to understand a lot more about it soon. That's going to be distributed across 50 states and a number of U.S. territories. It's a lot of money that's going to be used for broadband infrastructure and can also be used for digital equity projects. It's money that's going through the states. I guess I don't want to burn Sean's notes, so I'm going to stop talking about it. Just got a second left. Time's up. The answer was 10 billion. And if I got that wrong, that would be super embarrassing. So, all right, we had some confusion on that. So that's good. It was a good question.
All right. Our last question for the segment. What percentage of emergency broadband equipment or affordable connectivity program users can subsidy for mobile broadband? Okay. The music's off, but is it 10%, 32%, 68%, or 75%? And another fun fact, the cities with the most EBB subscribers are San Juan, Los Angeles, and Cleveland.
And just imagine, I could make the music, but that would be really awful. We got 9 seconds left. I just noticed we have a countdown timer. Super helpful.
Yeah.
I'm excited that Cleveland was in that list. Cleveland's doing great work.
Mm-hmm. Oh, time's up. And the answer is 68%.
Oh, Mike McCarthy's defending that lead.
That's right. Okay, so now we'll pass it on to Abby Waldrop, the Digital Navigator Manager at NDIA, who will share more about the Digital Navigator model.
Hi, thank you, Mela. How are you all doing? It seems like we've been having a good time with a lot of exciting trivia that I wish I could participate in. All right. I'm going to bring up my slides here and spend just a few minutes telling you about a model for digital inclusion work called Digital Navigators. I am the Digital Navigator Manager at NDIA, so I'm obviously very excited to talk about this topic. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to try to answer some questions that we are commonly asked about the Digital Navigator model. And then at the end of my time, I will share some resources and some upcoming opportunities for you all, hopefully, to be able to access. The Digital Navigator model was born of conversations in our community in 2020 when the pandemic changed our work in 2 key ways. Digital equity was more critical than ever, and traditional methods of digital inclusion work were no longer viable due to social distancing. The digital inclusion practitioners came up with this replicable model that has proven to be flexible enough to work in a number of different scenarios, and it's completely open source, developed by practitioners for practitioners. The Digital Navigator model stacks services to provide holistic digital inclusion support in a single role. You may hear these 3 areas of need, broadband, devices, and digital literacy, called the 3 legs of the digital inclusion stool, which demonstrates that we really need support in all 3 areas for sustainable progress towards digital equity. This model is built to ensure that an individual has support in all 3 areas simultaneously. So just to say it very briefly, digital navigators are trusted guides who address the whole digital inclusion process, including home connectivity, devices, and digital skills with community members through repeated interactions. Those repeated interactions are really key to the success of this model. Community members benefit from a guide with whom they can build a relationship and from whom they receive ongoing support throughout what can be a long process. While some refer to digital navigators as a form of tech support, they are not the Geek Squad or the Genius Apple Bar. Their role is something closer to an empathy-based social worker or a librarian with cultural competency. With empathy, they assess needs, recommend resources, and provide support throughout the process of accessing those resources. This flowchart is meant to visualize what that process looks like, so let's walk through it together. When a community member is identified as having a need related to digital equity, the first thing a digital navigator does is ask a set of questions in order to assess their needs. I'll share some resources in a moment, including a template intake and assessment form that can be helpful in this step. Once a digital navigator has worked with a community member to complete these assessments, they evaluate and discuss the needs that have become apparent. These conversations include learning what the community member prioritizes, how they would prefer to have those needs assessed, and what their goals are. Based on these conversations, a digital navigator will recommend digital literacy training, options for affordable connectivity, and devices that might be appropriate for their needs. Even if a client only requests assistance in one area, it is important that the digital navigator address potential needs in all three areas. After the community member has had a chance to access the resources, the digital navigator will check back in with that individual to make sure that the resource has in fact met their need and see if they need any additional support accessing the resource. They'll evaluate the progress together, and they may return to an earlier step to refer to more resources and discuss how needs have evolved. And then eventually an exit survey will sort of wrap up that relationship and collect any data that is needed. Okay, now we know what a digital navigator is and what they do. So let's talk about who serves as the digital navigator. The model is really flexible and has been adapted to a variety of situations. So here's just two examples. The city of San Diego hired 13 digital navigator interns. And so these were new part-time hires embedded in community organizations, the sole purpose of being a digital navigator. As a contrast, the Southeastern New York Library Council cross-trained 77 existing staff at libraries and community organizations so that they could provide digital navigator services in the course of their existing work when they saw the opportunity. We've also seen skilled volunteers and programs that use a mix of these different examples. Across all these successful scenarios, we see some commonalities with the staff. There's a list of critical skills and aptitudes that were identified by digital inclusion practitioners, and they are captured in this baseline job description that you can get on our website, which we'll share in a moment. The first thing we recommend is hiring from whatever community is being served, because that will ensure the digital navigator has a strong cultural competency and a basis of existing trust. Digital navigators do not need to be IT experts, but they do need to have an understanding of basic technology concepts. They should be comfortable enough to learn new technology skills independently as needed. So rather than seeking folks who have a strong technical background, it's important that digital navigators can communicate with clients in a language they can understand with good humor and creatively solve problems while providing excellent customer service. NDIA has developed an initial training for digital navigators to be provided remotely in about 6 hours across 4 days. And the objectives for that training are that trainees will understand and recognize what digital inclusion is and how activities support building digital equity in their communities. They will be equipped with the resources and local information necessary for digital inclusion holistically, and they will be able to reliably assess client needs and recommend courses of action regarding these 3 primary areas of need that we've been discussing. The next common question is, who do the digital navigators serve? So here's a few examples of communities that were targeted in different digital navigator programs. As you can see across these examples, organizations may choose to target specific segments of the population based on their mission, but also based on where their work would be most useful or most beneficial. So there's 2 data sources listed at the bottom of the slide that can provide data about internet adoption and device ownership to identify those target areas. Here's a quote from Christina, a client of the Salt Lake City Public Library's digital navigators, about why she contacted a digital navigator and why the program worked well for her. This quote comes from the video that I really love. It's on YouTube, so I would highly recommend looking that up. She says, "I contacted the Digital Navigator Project because I read about it in the paper. I'd had several periods of instruction in using a computer, but that kind of instruction had gone in one ear and out the other. I think that's because I don't speak computer language. Participating in this project has changed my life because now I text. I didn't text before, and I'm much more confident using my phone. My computer is no longer an enemy, it is a friend. This quote really illustrates that the digital navigator model is great at supporting people who might slip through the cracks of other programs, and with more individualized support, can see huge changes in their use of technology. This last question is closely linked to the previous one. Where do digital navigators serve? And again, the model is flexible. It's been adapted to a variety of situations, and those include some of the organizations that you see on the screen. The key is to meet an individual at the point of need in a way that aligns with an organization's goals, and then to use partnerships to meet all of that individual's needs across different sectors and categories. It is also important that a digital navigator is based in an organization that already has community trust. So I'm just going to wrap up first by plugging an upcoming opportunity. Google.org has invested $10 million to support establishing digital navigators in 18 rural and tribal communities in partnership with Amrid Critical Infrastructure. These will be multi-year projects with 30 months of ongoing support for the digital navigators from us and our community. The application period will open soon, so you can check out our website as listed there and sign up to get updates and view our information session about how you can get information about the application. And then last, our digital navigator model page has lots of resources. We collect and share best practices from the community, and all there are materials there that can be adapted and reused. A lot of that R&D can be done right there on that page, including our job description and forms I've mentioned. So if you have any questions about this model, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll look forward to hearing from you.
Excellent. I'm blowing up the script for a second, Pamela. I just wanted to say that what Abby said, I think I would reinforce two things. One was that it's not the Geek Squad, but I just love sharing the story because, as I understand it, Geek Squad started here in Minnesota when they did, and they also started by trying to get very technical people and teach them people skills. And then they decided this could be apocryphal, but they decided that it was better to take people who are non-technical and who knew how to communicate well with people and teach them technical skills, and that's where they ended up.
Yeah, I actually hired somebody from the Geek Squad as a digital navigator before, and I could see how that worked.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Abby. So now we are shifting to our funding discussion with the unprecedented level of broadband infrastructure funding that's opening up. I'm sure there's some of you out there that are overwhelmed by the information, and don't worry, we got you covered. We have Sean Gonzalez, senior reporter, editor, and communication team lead for ILSR's Community Broadband Networks Initiative, who will share 5 things you need to know about the bucket of funds.
And I'm Yvette Scores. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the communications director at the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and I'm really happy to co-host with ILSR today. First, this session is called Demystifying Broadband Policy, so we don't want to leave you in a lurch here. NDIA has a new cheat sheet just released. It's on our policy page, and I'll be putting a link in our YouTube chat. Check it out. You will get all you need to understand the agencies, the acts, the programs that apply to digital equity work. We have all the acronyms there, the buckets of funding. So it's a really great 2 pages for you to have present and keep nearby as you delve further into this. Sean, do you want to get started with some of what's in the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act?
Yes. Thank you. So this really is an unprecedented amount of federal funds that are being made available. It's not an exaggeration to say it's a once in a generation investment. And the real action for cities and non-rural communities is with the 2 buckets of broadband money that are in the American Rescue Plan. That's the Capital Projects Fund and the state and local fiscal recovery funds. The Treasury Department, of course, is administering the funds. And the first thing really folks ought to keep in mind is that the rules require that states get local input on its broadband plan on a variety of factors. Many states have already announced how much of these funds are being allocated for broadband through state grant programs. And really, there's really those two buckets of funds in the American Rescue Plan. The Capital Projects Fund, that's the $10 billion bucket, which was the answer to a trivia question earlier. And the Treasury rules say that projects that use these funds must take local needs into account. That's very important. And by that, they mean surveying communities to determine what's affordable or an affordable price point for a monthly internet service. And then there's also requirements that there's simultaneous investment in infrastructure and digital skills training. Now, the big deal with these rules is states get to decide what's affordable, reliable, and unserved. That's the big thing in these rules, that states get to decide that with input from local communities. So the program expands the definition of unserved to take into account whether or not service is affordable. That's if an existing high-speed internet service in a community is found to not be affordable, that's considered under these rules to be a sufficient trigger to use funds to deploy broadband initiatives. The rules also put the thumb on the scale in favor of fiber and making investments in historically disadvantaged communities. It also prioritizes investment in public projects and cooperatives and connecting community anchor institutions. But whatever networks are built with this money, they have to basically be really fast and future-proof. Now, the second bucket we've been calling SLRFRF, which is just a way to remember the acronym SLRF, the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. That's the big $350 bucket. It can be used for a variety of infrastructure, water, sewer, et cetera, but also for broadband. And about half of that money's already been distributed, and the other half will be distributed in the next few months or so. And in the American Rescue Plan, this is the only bucket of money that goes directly to local communities. The other buckets of money and federal funding, that stuff is being funneled to the state level. And like the CPF funds, any network built with the SLRFRF funds has to really build networks that are really fast and future-proof, and they have to support the Affordable Connectivity Program for as long as that program exists. Now, local governments need to identify areas where there's at least some households that lack high-speed services or lack affordable access or lack reliable access. And the Treasury has made it crystal clear that not every housing unit served by networks that are built with this money has to meet those particular conditions, not every unit. And this is also important as well, that a good source of data for figuring out where these connectivity challenges lie in local communities in terms of affordability and some of these other factors are the school systems. Where school systems have had to deploy mobile wireless hotspots, schools are a really good source of data of knowing where the real connectivity challenges lie in communities, particularly as it relates to households and families. Now, I just wanted to highlight one example of a city that's doing some really cool and interesting things with the rescue plan money. That's the city of Baltimore. So the mayor there has allocated $35 million of its rescue plan funds to build a citywide open access fiber network. And we recently put out a really excellent audio field report that was done by Matt Purdy on what's happening in Baltimore that we encourage you to go to our website, muninetworks.org, and look for our community broadband bits podcast, episode 496. It's it's the second most recent one. I think another important note is that both of these pots of funds, the CPF funds and the SLRFRF money, can be used for digital equity initiatives, meaning devices and training and things of that nature. Now, unlike the funds in the infrastructure bill, the rescue plan money is far more useful and flexible for cities in more densely populated non-rural regions. And really the thing to keep in mind overall with the American Rescue Plan money is that the money is going to the states, and different states are coming up with different rules about how they will distribute it. But there is a mechanism for local communities to have input And so it's important for community broadband advocates at the local level to really be engaged with their state broadband offices and policymakers around how these grant programs are being formed and what the deadlines are for submitting grants and what have you. So let me flip it back over to Yvette as we get into the infrastructure bill.
I can't believe you didn't start laughing saying slurfer so many times. It sounds like a new 7-Eleven drink or something.
I'm so used to hearing Chris say it. I've just adopted it.
Well, be sure to use that cheat sheet, everyone, because you'll get all those acronyms spelled out. So now let's go to the new money, the Infrastructure Act that was passed November 15th. I can remember that because it's my birthday, so I always get that trivia question right. It includes $65 billion for digital equity and broadband deployment, plus a section on digital discrimination. So you see those different buckets broken down here, and we're going to cover a few of them. I'm going to jump into the Digital Equity Act, also known as DEA. If you can go to the next slide. So the Digital Equity Act, oh, maybe the one after. The Digital Equity Act is made up of 2 grant programs. The first bucket is capacity grants, which help states execute their state digital equity plans. And the other bucket is a competitive grant program, which will be available to organizations doing on-the-ground digital inclusion work like NDIA affiliates. There's $1.5 billion in there for state planning and state capacity grants or implementation grants. And the NTIA is the administering agency. And the timeline, if we go to the next thing, we can look at for the Digital Equity Act. These are broad estimates, so keep that in mind. They're not deadlines that NTIA has announced, but they follow the guidance of the law. So the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or the NOFO, will be open in mid-June for the planning grants. And the application window for that will be open for 60 days. So that brings us to about mid-August. We anticipate that those planning grants will then be awarded in late fall 2022. And then states have 12 months to develop their plans. So following that timeline, that will be taking place for the majority of 2023. After that, there will be capacity grants, which will be used for implementation of those state digital equity plans. So that planning they've spent 12 months on will then get funding. And after that, the competitive grant cycle opens with $1.25 billion allocated to that bucket. So what does this timeline mean for you? Basically, funding for community organizations through the Digital Equity Act is not going to be at your doorstep tomorrow, but there's lots you can do to prepare for what's coming. You can work with other organizations. You can form coalitions, take some of that advice that you heard earlier from our colleagues around the country, and you can build relationships with state and city government agencies. So definitely, if you missed that coalition part in this presentation, rewind and replay it, review it, because that's what's most important right now. Sean, you want to talk about BEAD? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So as Yvette mentioned, of the $65 billion that's in the infrastructure bill for broadband, $42.5 billion is to fund broadband deployment. That's building new networks or expanding existing ones. Now, let me just say here that the SLRFRF money that I was just speaking about in the American Rescue Plan, that money is available now. The capital projects fund in the rescue plan is coming soonish, probably in the next few months or so, maybe in the fall. But the BEAD money that's in the infrastructure bill, it's going to be a while. the NTIA is, I think, about 6 months or so, well, maybe 3 or so months left on the clock to come up with the rules, and then states have to submit plans. So that money is not going to be making its way to states anytime super soon, like probably early 2023. So the BEAD program, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, this bill is much more rigid in terms of how states can spend the money. So places that don't have access to 25.3 megabits per second broadband is the first priority. And so that means that the bulk of this money in this bill is really is aiming for rural regions, rural America. Only after states certify that all of their unserved areas, less than 25.3, or people that didn't have access to 25.3 have been taken care of, can the money be used to define what is called underserved, which the bill says are people that have access to broadband at speeds of less than 120 megabits per second. Now, there's a little bit of a dispute as to whether or not that money can be spent on low-income apartment buildings and consider that being underserved. If that money can be spent from the start, or if it has to wait until the unserved areas have been taken care of first. Also, states need to have, in order to access this money, states need to have a master plan, but it needs to have robust local community input. So there's really a mechanism for local communities to have a voice in what that plan looks like for the state. And this has to be submitted to states, as I said, to even access the money. Now, this is important because if states, because states will then have the power to choose how much money is going to be allocated towards rural communities and how much towards low-income urban areas, for example. Now, there's a rigorous guide that kind of breaks down all of these various buckets that you can check out, that was put out by Common Sense. It's called the Common Sense Federal Funding Guide. And I think the last thing I'll leave you with are these two thoughts. One is that most of this money, the BEAD money, is going to be coming to you through the state. And the final thought about all of this funding is that this is our chance. This is our moment. There's not going to be another major appropriation for broadband in the coming years. And so it's important that we really start to zero in and sort through these things so that we don't let this historic moment pass us by.
Thank you, Sean and Yvette. On my screen for a while there, it looked like Yvette had local tattooed on her forehead, and I just want to say it works for you. I think you should think about it. We wanted to clarify that that with the Digital Equity Act, there is the planning grant is money for states to do stakeholder engagement and write their digital equity plans. And then one other thing that was some late breaking news that I was trying to verify this morning is that the CPF funds, the $10 billion fund from Treasury that has popped up a couple times that Sean described, the first bucket, states have already started submitting their plans, and they're going back and forth with Treasury right now to get those accepted. That money could start flowing soon for some states, and other states have until September to basically work that out. So that's the timeline on that. Now we are going to be moving into a video, and this is a video that I'm excited about because even though Sean spoke while he was on mute, you know, we got some friendly rivalry here. NDIA staff kicking it, just doing a great job. I'm very excited about the ILSR staff. You know, we got great teams here. This is a chance for us to highlight another one of our members. Christine Parker is going to be in this video, and it's 5 minutes about the state of mapping, where it's going. Once again, produced by Dustin Loop. So for people who are the big Dustin fans, this is your moment. Christine Parker does our GIS and data visualization on the Community Broadband Networks team. So let's roll that video, and then we're going to head into our last trivia break.
Hi, I'm Christine Parker, the GIS and Data Visualization Specialist for the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about the broadband mapping efforts happening across the United States. I'll cover some historical background on the shortcomings of the current data, efforts to address this at the state and federal level, and then we'll hear about the National Broadband Mapping Collection and how that is working to support these efforts. So the first background. Historically, the FCC has collected and summarized broadband availability using what's known as Form 477. ISPs are required to use this form to report on their service areas and the advertised speeds that they offer to customers in those service areas. However, the methods of reporting on Form 77 have led to some widely recognized flaws in the federal data set, which generally lacks granularity and in many cases overstates the availability of broadband across the U.S. As a result of this pretty long-standing issue, recent legislation directed the FCC to develop new maps that improve the accuracy of broadband availability data across the country, which led to the development of the FCC's Broadband Data Collection Program, which establishes requirements for ISPs that take effect this summer. So along with this collection of data, the FCC is developing something called the Fabric, which will be a data set of all locations across the U.S. that could be served by broadband. So as we are waiting on these new maps to become a reality, many states have actually undertaken their own broadband data collection efforts. Using a variety of methods, including developing their own location fabric, collecting data directly from ISPs, and running speed test surveys to create more accurate availability maps. So each state is going to face its own challenges when it comes to deploying broadband. Different size states, size populations, geographies, and communities too are going to face problems from community to community. So one of the goals of the Broadband Mapping Coalition is to be a resource for states and communities working through these challenges.
Oh, hey, sorry, Christine. I was just doing a little bit of light reading about how anyone can map, which is perfect because as you were just explaining, there's a great need for better data collection and analysis in the US when it comes to broadband availability, affordability, and adoption. To this end, the National Broadband Mapping Coalition was formed to convene a cross-disciplinary group of experts focused on establishing best practices and empowering communities to access and in many cases collect the data that they need. Measuring and mapping broadband is critical to digital equity as this data is often used to determine funding eligibility, infrastructure planning, and more. The coalition believes that for broadband data collection efforts to have the most impact, they need to be based on open, transparent, and verifiable data and methodologies. So in addition to advocating for this at the federal level, the coalition seeks to empower communities to take these matters into their own hands. And that's where our work on the Community Broadband Mapping and Data Collection Toolkit comes into play. The goal of this toolkit is to provide a robust resource for communities looking to undertake their own broadband mapping efforts. We are working hard to curate a wide range of resources and tools that will give communities more agency and ownership over their community's data. It will include information on the shortcomings of currently available data and point to the types of data that communities should consider collecting to complete the picture of broadband availability and adoption locally, including internet performance metrics like speed and latency, as well as other indicators such as pricing and affordability. The guide will also provide information on what communities will need to do to undertake these efforts, including what skills, tools, and resources might be required and where they can look for this capacity. And of course, it will provide insight into how this data can be analyzed, visualized, and used, including in ways to pursue funding opportunities, defend challenges associated with the grant processes, and launch challenges of their own to disprove inaccurate federal data. As we build this, we want to engage with community leaders to inform the development of the toolkit. So if your community has already undertaken these efforts, we'd love to learn more about your process, including the challenges, successes, and lessons learned. Additionally, if your community is considering launching a mapping project, we'd love to hear about what you'd like to see included in this toolkit. You can reach me at dustin@marconisociety.org, and I'd encourage you to visit broadbandmappingcoalition.org. to learn more about the coalition and consider joining our listserv and monthly meetings to help inform this important work moving forward. Both of these will be made available in the chat, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Justin. The National Broadband Mapping Coalition can be very helpful. I just want to flash back for a second to something that Krista and Peggy noted, which is that super helpful to have something that people can do. And conducting speed tests and getting this data is something that people can do to organize around, makes them feel like they're getting active, and that leads to them wanting to do more things. So it's a great organization to keep an eye on to see how to use that mapping data. Also, don't want to ruin anyone's day, but we're coming toward the end. We still have telehealth and a short presentation there, as well as one of the most popular presentations from the lightning rounds of net inclusion. David Keys has recaptured the magic, put the lightning back in the bottle for us. That's coming up right after these trivia questions that we're gonna rock into right now. So let's see if Mike McCarthy's still there to defend his lead, and we are going to roll into question 1 here. How many households, this is households, not people, how many households receive free internet service through Hamilton County Schools EdConnect program in Chattanooga? I should have caught that was country. It's county schools. You got 1,000 households, 9,000 households, 50,000 households, or 120,000 households. So you're going to have to pick from among those. And this is according to a report that they've done. It's a wonderful report. I highly recommend doing a little searching for the Hamilton County EdConnect program. It's just really amazing what they've been able to do with that municipal fiber network the city of Chattanooga built through its electric power board. The answer is 9,000 households, 9,000 families who are in this free lunch and reduced lunch program have that benefit now because of just a remarkable coalition that of folks working together in Chattanooga.
Awesome. Looks like Mike McCarthy is still in the lead.
He is.
All right. So the next question is, the Digital Equity Act provides $60 billion for states to create digital equity plans. Once a state receives their grant funds, how long do they have to create this plan? If I actually just covered this just now when she was talking about the Digital Equity Act timeline. So you have 60 days, 90 days, 12 months, or 24 months. And I also want to plug NDIA's policy cheat sheet. It's really great for breaking down those different acronyms. So on the cheat sheet, we have that it's one of the acts from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We also have ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, CAA, Consolidated Appropriations Act. Such a great resource if you need to know what those acronyms mean. And all right, so time's up. The answer is 12 months. Okay, Mike McCarthy.
All right, I have to say, I know Mike, and I cannot imagine he's going to get the next one wrong, so people better beat him to it. It's a bonus question, the last question we have. This is a difficult one. It's a new question. It's a picture question, and it's going to go quick. Which man is known as one of the internet's founding fathers? And is he the person on the right or the person on the left? Picture A or picture B? Which one of these men is known as one of the internet's founding fathers? And the bonus question is, was that actually him appearing in the Matrix movies? I'm afraid that there's people here who are like too young to even get some of the Matrix references. It's very sad for me.
I see the same face. This is the same person. Trick question.
No, they did a wonderful job of creating him. This is Vint Cerf. Vint Cerf, who has just done a wonderful job technically, and that has long supported connecting communities, including indigenous communities particularly, has been very generous in his time and resources to try to make sure everyone can benefit from the internet. So that was our trivia round. We'll come back to announce the winners in a second. We have to make sure that there was no fraud involved. There's going to be all kinds of checking and auditing and that sort of stuff. But we'll move on to a video here that Pamela will introduce.
Right, awesome. So next, again, we have David Keys, the Digital Equity Program Manager with the City of Seattle, to speak on talking to local government. Another fun fact, David was NDIA's first recipient of the Charles Benton Digital Equity Champion Award in 2016. All right, so David, take it away.
Hi, my name is Dave Keys, and I'm the Digital Equity Program Manager for the City of Seattle. I'm here to share some tips on working with government at any level. And hopefully, this will help you be a better digital equity champion and both help influence government and help government be able to work more effectively with you. So let's get started. So first thing is that you are the experts. And so your mission is to share your expertise, help educate about the challenges and solutions, and find and grow champions. So you want to relate digital equity value to community needs and services, human services, youth development, crime reduction, workforce, etc., and develop champions across strands of government. Find interested staff to learn from and collaborate with. Research who's on what committees, who staffs them. Think about both relationships with electeds as well as with their staff. Look at departments for who are the planners and implementers as well as leadership. And don't forget to reach out to volunteer or present at boards and commissions and committee meetings. You can do briefings for them and help give them what they need to do their work better for digital equity. Use staff to help you learn what's happening and how you can help with background, then meaningful input at meaningful times. Government has this great role of being a convener, so use them to help convene other government, industry, community, and potential collaborators. It's also valuable to invite government folks to your table, to other tables. We get value from being part of and showing diverse participation and community engagement, and we better learn what the challenges and potential solutions are. And make it real for folks. Engage them in your work. So do career talks, let them talk about how they use technology for government, how they use that in their work. Do activities together, have them try out some assistive technology, for instance. Invite them to be an active part of graduation events, doing something, not just watching. And things like visits to City Hall bring digital equity closer to government and government closer to the community. And learn the budget process and timing, all of it, and keep at it. So it takes a while. The budget process often starts very early with department proposals, moves to mayors, councils, or legislators, public hearings, then back to departments for implementation. So you've got an opportunity to be involved at all those phases. Also, don't forget to educate, help, and hold candidates responsible for digital equity. Make these a win for them and for you. Short background presentations, proposals, and stories at the ready are helpful to have throughout this process. And encourage mayors, councils, state legislators to declare digital equity and to pass legislation declaring digital equity a priority. This can help downstream with instructions to departments for work and budget to look for it in work plans and strategic plans, and pointing to it for program funding or partnerships and work. And here's some communication tips. You're competing for airtime, so start short and concise. What do you want and why? Talk to your liaisons about what their communication preferences are. How do they want documents? What works for them? Encourage their questions and their priorities so that you can relate your digital equity work to what their focus is, whether it's education or something else. And design documents to be read quickly, making key points in the first couple lines. Adapt language from their positions, from their statements. Use that and look at their media as well. And then help provide them with language to promote the cause, as we've done with the National Digital Inclusion Alliance definitions and other materials. You can also use other government materials for references. And follow up with summaries of meetings, decisions, and next steps. And just to think about too, written correspondence is a public record, and there's value to holding in-person and call time to discuss background and strategies. And this slide shows the 4 elements of digital equity, including applications and services. I want to encourage greater use of this 4th leg of digital equity. One driver for government is ensuring people can use their services. It's a driver for many of us. And those need to be designed with equity in mind. So the other elements are critical together to helping people use and create applications and services with diverse, successful engagement and in cultural context. Lastly, as I talked about convening earlier, your opportunity and effectiveness also relies on using and building your network of networks to impact policy. think broadly about allies to help. Using both public pressure and quiet collaboration are useful at different points. So build that network, not just at the last minute, but over the long haul. And then community support, documentation, letters, tags, social media, calls, written testimony, and oral testimony are all critical to helping staff and legislators move support forward. These are all part of what it takes to influence policy. So thanks. Hope that was helpful, and get at it.
What great advice. And I just really appreciate the David sharing that with us. Turns out he goes by Dave. I never saw that coming. So we want to have him back to be able to do more Q&A in a future one, but we're trying to keep this tight. We don't want to go over too much. We are going to do a video now with Joanna Barton, just a real great advocate. And then we are going to finish up with a couple of questions for Angela and potentially me, if I can think of anything to say. Joanna Barton was most recently with Methodist Healthcare and the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. She's now a principal at Barton Garcia Advisors, and she's helping underserved communities achieve full participation in the digital economy and achieve digital equity. Joanna is someone that many of us have watched for a long time, doing great work, working with banks to get them involved in digital equity, and then turning to telehealth and continuing to work in that. So we pre-taped an interview. This is cut down, and we are going to release the full-length interview later on this week or early next week, and we'll share that in multiple social media channels. But here are some highlights from our quick discussion. It's about 10 minutes.
You know, I was in community development and responsible for the Community Reinvestment Act at the Dallas Fed. And I was a researcher as well with a special expertise on South Texas and the Texas-Mexico border. And when I was doing the Texas Border Colonia study of the Federal Reserve back in 2015, I was visiting with the colonias. Those are communities that have traditionally they're more informal communities, or peri-urban and rural and deep rural areas, communities that form, self-built housing and they're, they began as like farm worker housing and communities that developed. Generally unincorporated, but some of them have been incorporated into cities, but lacking basic infrastructure. And many, important issues to think about, around that, and water, wastewater, and it was a public health concern for decades now in Texas. And I wasn't asking the question, but I was doing a quantitative and qualitative study. So in the focus groups and the interviews, I wasn't asking about broadband infrastructure. I hadn't thought about it. I was asking kind of the regular water, safe drinking water, wastewater, roads, paved roads, and so forth. But in every interview, or in every county, the interviews revealed that broadband was a problem. So it came to my attention from the very lowest income communities in the country, really. They're described as, having third world conditions in the United States. There's so much innovation there, like self-built housing and all of that entails. And but it is a persistent poverty region, one of 4 in the country. So that's how it came to my attention. And I realized as they told their stories to the Board of Governors, as we were going to be updating the Community Reinvestment Act, and I was telling the story as well, it became clear from talking to them. They were talking to me about the homework gap. I didn't know it was called that then, but they were, giving me great examples and about, access to jobs and opportunities and workforce development opportunities, and how it limited, right, that. So that's how it was brought to our attention. And I realized it should be part of the Community Reinvestment Act. Like essential infrastructure in general is part of what we encourage banks to invest in low-income communities. And so we, that's when their stories really helped, along with other stories around the country, to change the Community Reinvestment Act and include broadband as essential infrastructure, like water and electricity, that banks and community partners should invest in low-income communities. So it was the people of the border colonies that brought it to the Federal Reserve's attention. We have some of the greatest health disparities as many low-income communities. 30% of the Mexican American population on the border has diagnosed diabetes, for example. So as I looked at the greatest health disparities that I had studied in the border colonia study, it began to be very clear that we needed the tool of telehealth to be able to reach into these communities. And of course, understanding, that there's two sides of it, right? Hospitals having the tools that they need and the speed and capacity that they need, as well as rural, urban clinics, and then people, right, having that access. So in 2018, healthcare became the biggest creator of jobs in our economy, overtook retail and manufacturing. And we know that middle skills jobs, even before the pandemic, 85% required digital skills. So even entering the middle class, right? And we haven't kept up with the new entry points into the middle class. So healthcare is a big part of that. So with regard to transitioning into the digital economy and the fourth industrial revolution, we haven't kept up. And people, we need this tool, right? People need to have access to this tool. We need, hospital systems and clinics need access to this tool. And so that's where it became very evident that the digital divide was impacting everything in our economy and this critical area. And if we are going to achieve health equity or move the needle on it and bring, we know the challenges, right? If you grow up in a low-income area, low-income zip code, your life expectancy is 20 years less than a higher end or middle income area. Those are huge disparities in health outcomes. And so it just became evident that those are the communities. If we're going to create efficiency and effectiveness in our economy and solve our biggest health challenges, and the biggest expense in our health system is in serving low-income populations. If we're going to do that, we need this tool. And it just became very evident. Many systems, hospital systems and clinics, are realizing the importance of the social determinants of health. And NDIA has a great, social determinants of health chart, and demonstrates how broadband is a super social determinant of health, because it relates to access to care in the ways we've talked about, right? It relates to quality of care. It relates to community conditions. And increasingly there are models for how hospital systems and their philanthropic arms, which I have worked in that area, are realizing they need to be concerned too with community conditions, vital community conditions. So the entity that I most recently worked for, that was part of our plan, is to work in the social determinants of health and impact vital community conditions. And what's understood now is that broadband is one of the super social determinants of health. So that's why I think, as people have learned, and leaders in hospital systems and clinics have learned, is that they need to be involved in this, and they're open, right, to being more open to being partners, right? Because one of the biggest things that brings success is partnership. So think about, as you're approaching your communities, your regions, about partnership with hospital entities, healthcare systems, philanthropic arms of hospitals, because they're going to have an interest, and they can be a real important part of the puzzle. One of the things that I have found is that an asset-based approach in doing digital inclusion is very important, because as I was looking at rural South Texas and started interviewing the small, ISPs, rural and otherwise, and the co-ops, electric and telephone co-ops that have doing broadband, they're huge assets because they already, of course, have polls and access to rights of way, and they know how to serve rural communities and underserved communities. They also have a very different bottom line, and I know I had always kind of known that, right? They're different, but wow, they're kind of like social enterprises. They want to really make a change. So yes, they have to recover cost, but they're not, the ones I've talked to are not concerned with maximizing return on investment. They have this balance that they have found in their mission and their business model of the double bottom line of community good and serving the community and promoting economic opportunity and obviously access to care and everything else, and making a sufficient return on investment.
I want to thank Jordana for doing that interview. Jordana was ready to answer questions, but we were not able to fit it in. We are going to do more on telehealth that is less compressed in the future. So just a deep appreciation for her time and her great work in this field.
Awesome. So now we are going to share the winners of the trivia. So drum roll. Okay. So we have Mike McCarthy at 77%. Then we have Robert Samidi and then Robbie at 66. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Well done.
Yes, that's amazing because I definitely would not have had that high of a score, and I have the answers. So, so for all the winners, please reach out to Amanda at digitalinclusion.org. The email is amanda@digitalinclusion.org in order to receive your prize. Now, for our last few minutes, Chris and Angela will answer some questions that we received throughout the event. So let's get Angela on. Awesome. Hi, Angela. So question number 1, what steps can people take to ensure digital access in our communities, regardless of citizenship status?
There's a couple of different things that folks can do. When we're working, figuring out the programming itself, how we help people sign up for the internet, how we help people with devices, how we help people with digital literacy, to just not make it matter if they have citizenship status or not, right? Like that's if it's a program that you can define the rules to, well then define the rules how you want to define the rules. And then if it's a federal program, then it's all of our jobs to advocate to make sure that they have access to that program, just as we all did with the Affordable Connectivity Program. So I don't think there's really things holding it back, but then there's also that next step of, well, how do you do it well? Right. So making sure that we don't accidentally put barriers up, like, oh, you have to have a driver's license. Okay, well, that's a barrier. So if you're careful about how you set up your program, or even if there's a local program being developed, you can be the advocate to make sure that barriers aren't accidentally on purpose sometimes set up, but you can engage directly into how those are set up, or if it's already set up. Right. This is why we keep saying advocacy. And I know lots of folks are like, whoa, we don't do that. You're just educating. You're helping folks understand how to have a better program.
Yeah, I would just add that a slightly different way of saying a part of that, because I think Angela covered it well, so I'll be very quick, is that we should design our programs so they don't require people to stand in long lines or have long waits or have to do a lot of documentation. If we want it to work well, if we want it to serve the audience, we need to lower the barriers to participating. And I think that serves a lot of goals.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question that we have is, can you elaborate on the role that you see local city council offices play regarding the infrastructure funds?
Sure. I think there's two things. One is to be in contact with the state. And if the state is not listening to you, if you're in a state that is not particularly interested in local input, hollering about it, reaching out to organizations that may be able to help give you a microphone to let you know about it. I think NTIA, when they're designing the rules around this, will hopefully have good checks to give local governments the ability to verify that they have in fact been consulted and their advice has been taken seriously. And I think a part of that is to take it seriously. Local governments have to be strong advocates. You have to be educated on what to ask for and how to do it, because we've done a lot of work, and that's a royal we. A lot of folks have done a lot of work to make sure that states and local governments are in the driver's seat. And now we need folks to be making the right asks and doing their homework to be able to do that.
I think the other piece is that you may have a city council that's not engaged, but they could be engaged. And so that, again, is that educating them, like, hey, did you know there's this money that you, as one of our elected leaders, could be helping make sure the money goes to where it needs to be going. So the fact that you're here and learning about all this means that you might end up being the expert in town. I know, like, folks are like, what? This is the first time I'm participating, but you might be the expert. And so if you don't bring that message to them, they may never hear about it.
Yeah, don't feel like experts know what they're doing. Like, all of us are in new territory all the time, and it's scary, and we do the best we can, and that's what we need you to do too.
Exactly.
Awesome. So our last question before we wrap it up is it accurate to say that states get to decide what is considered unserved or underserved for ARPA, but not for BEAD?
My answer is more or less, but in the private chat, I think that Angela may have a more nuanced question or a more nuanced answer. So let me say that it's interesting in that the final rules for SLRFRF in particular, the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, very clearly give local governments the power to create a data set that reflects whether there's an affordability challenge or other challenges, even in areas where you may have a cable company that is doing a fairly good job of connecting most people. If there are people left behind, local governments are empowered to document that and take action with those funds. And that is similar to the CPF rules, the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund rules, which is a $10 billion bucket as well. Both of those, SLRFRF and the CPF, come from the American Rescue Plan, and we read it as being pretty flexible, whereas we read BEAD as being much less flexible. Although there is, as Sean was saying, rulemaking in NTIA that will determine some aspects of BEAD where cities may have more power.
That was exactly going to be my point, was that we don't yet have the rules from NTIA. So we don't know, like, are they going to, how much flexibility will they give the states?
Yeah, we may have two states that are borders, and one is like super flexible and the other is not. And that's one of the things to understand. The money that goes to the states, the federal government sets these like guide rails, and then states find a path within there that fit within them. And it might be very different from state to state.
Awesome.
So I think that's it. And we have an opportunity for feedback, which we would love for people. Oh, thank you, Angela. We're just going to unceremoniously remove you from the screen because I just moved on without recognizing you. Thank you so much for your effort and NDIA's great contributions to all of this work as well as this presentation.
Thank you to ILSR for being such amazing partners and having such fun interactive events. It's awesome.
And I have to say, Pamela, you are so good in net inclusion. I think you do a wonderful job with this, and it was wonderful to co-MC with you.
Thank you, Chris. I enjoyed co-MCing with you as well. Love your energy. Sorry that Ryan Reynolds didn't come and introduce you, but maybe next time.
I'm just holding my rage on the inside. I think we have a link to the feedback. Wonderful. A couple of comments from one of our audience members, Mary Ann Van Cura, who's here in the Twin Cities. Minnesota's wonderful. Lots of great folks from Minnesota doing this work, spread out around the country. I want to thank Henry Holgertz for doing the engineering behind the scenes and preparing the videos and just generally we wouldn't even thought this was possible without Henry. So thank you so much, Henry, for doing that work. My team, a lot of them didn't show up, but they were really working hard behind the scenes. So I want to thank all of them. Do we have the link to the feedback mechanism? I know we are also going to email that out to people that are on the Eventbrite registration. I think we might have spaced that. We didn't have a plan for ending the show, so I think it's posted in the. It's going to be posted in the chat as well. in another second, and just want to make sure that I didn't miss. Oh yeah, right. So Pamela, do you want to wrap up NDIA's comments?
Yeah, I would love for all of you to stay connected to NDIA and join our wonderful community. You'll get access to our awesome newsletter, our thriving listserv, and our community calls, which is coming up this Friday. So in order to join, go to our website, digitalinclusion.org/join.
And thank you, Google, for maybe we can keep that on the screen a little bit longer. The thing I wanted to thank, or I wanted to know also was ILSR has a website, ilsr.org, and the broadband work is focused often on muninetworks.org. We're on all kinds of social media. We do podcasts. We have the Community Broadband Bits podcast. We do the Connect This show, which Angela's been a guest on multiple times, and there's lots of ways to connect with us. So thank you all. Feedback, give it to any of us directly. We'd love to know what worked, what didn't work. I think we might make it a little bit shorter next time. There's so much great stuff. It's hard to turn down people, but we'll have to do more events with a little more spacing. Thank you all so much. Wonderful to be here.
Thank you all.